We've all been there. We all want to become happier and healthier. We want to feel good and look good. Everybody wants to be more happy and more healthy than be sadder and more unhealthy, right? But what if I told you that Americans' food corporations are actively working against your goal to become happier and healthier? So according to the CDC, chronic diseases are the leading cause of illness, disability, and death in America. 3 in 4 Americans are suffering from one chronic disease or more. So that's 3/4 of the American population. Over the past 100 years, chronic diseases, they have increased significantly. So at the same time that chronic disease has been increasing significantly, the production of ultra-processed foods has also been increasing significantly. There is a lot of research that is linking the increase in ultra-processed food production to the increase in chronic disease in the American population. So I believe that the widespread consumption of ultra-processed foods is a primary driver in the increase in chronic health conditions. So this video will outline what ultra-processed foods are, the link between ultra-processed foods and chronic diseases, and how food corporations prioritize company profit over consumer well-being. So let's start. What even are ultra-processed foods? So Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health defines ultra-processed foods as having one or more ingredient that would not be found typically in the kitchen. They also say that ultra-processed foods undergo processing techniques like pre-frying, molding, extrusion. So as ultra-processed foods become ultra-processed using the techniques that I just described, it actually strips them of their nutrients, it fills them with unhealthy chemicals, and makes them hyper-palatable. So let's take a step back and think about that a little bit. So it strips these foods of their nutrients. So if you eat them, you are not getting proper nutrients. It fills them with unhealthy chemicals. So if you eat them, you're eating unhealthy chemicals. And it makes them hyper-palatable, meaning that when you eat them, you want to eat more. Hyper-palatable meaning very palatable, right? So the more you eat, the more you want to eat, right? So it just leads to a very slippery slope of ingesting unhealthy chemicals, low nutrient dense foods with combinations that make your brain want to eat more. So in an article by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, they found that ultra-processed foods typically contain a combination of ingredients like sugar, fat, and salt that actually stimulates your brain's reward system. So this actually makes it hard to stop eating. So think about it this way. In the same way that cigarettes give your brain nicotine and stimulate your brain's reward system, making it very addictive, these ultra-processed foods are designed in a very similar way. They are filled with macronutrients that stimulate your brain's reward system, which makes you crave more. So let's go over a very simple example of this concept. Take Oreos. 10 Oreos contains nearly 600 calories. Although it is a lot of calories, you are not getting the proper nutrients that your body needs. And you are not becoming satiated, meaning becoming full, right? On top of not becoming full, you also crave more. I'm sure you have been there. You eat an Oreo and then you can't stop thinking about eating the next one. I mean, I know I've been there. I'm in the pantry, I have one Oreo and then I grab another one and then another one and then, it just turns into something way bigger, right? So for the same amount of calories as those 10 Oreos, you could eat 9 eggs, all right? So when you eat 9 eggs, you get 600 calories and you would be getting plenty of vital nutrients that your body needs, and there's a great chance that you'll find yourself becoming full. If you gave me 10 Oreos or you gave me 9 eggs and I had to decide which one would make me more full, it would obviously be the eggs. I don't even know if I could get down 5 or 6 eggs, but you put 20 Oreos on my plate and I'd probably have no problem getting that down. So that is a real world example about how these foods are hyper palatable, meaning that they're really easy to overeat and they don't contain proper nutrients that your body needs, right? So overconsumption of these calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods is actually associated with chronic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular conditions. So, according to the Food and Drug Administration, researchers have found links between the consumption of highly processed foods and a range of other negative health outcomes. So these health outcomes include cardiovascular disease, obesity, and even certain cancers. So it is estimated that nearly 70% of the US food supply consists of food commonly considered ultra-processed. 70% of the food supply is ultra-processed, and they are leading to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. So furthermore, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health says that the ultra-processed foods are associated with the worst diet quality and a long and growing list of adverse health outcomes. A 2024 umbrella review of 45 meta-analyses, including almost 10 million people, found that diets high in ultra-processed foods are linked to 32 health conditions, including obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiometabolic disease, and many cancers, gastrointestinal disorder, asthma, anxiety, depression, cardiovascular disease, and even all-cause mortality. So these two articles that I just referenced show how consumption of ultra-processed foods ultimately lead to negative health outcomes. So at this point, you have seen the potential health risks of eating ultra-processed foods, right? So you may be asking yourself, why, if they're so bad for the human population, why are they still produced by these companies? That's a very simple answer. The reason is because food corporations generate a substantial amount of profit from selling these ultra-processed foods to consumers just like you. So in an article by the National Library of Medicine, it is stated that unlike other foods, ultra-processed foods are exclusively made by for-profit corporations. And it is well recognized that these corporations have played a large role in driving the global ultra-processed food dietary transition. So ultra-processed foods, they are seeking profit. So they have strong incentives to create these hyper-palatable, super cheaply made foods. And the unhealthy ingredients and stuff like that is just a byproduct of it having to be super cheap. So when you're walking through the store, you'll see this. You'll see on the shelves the brightly colored boxes, enticing designs. There's going to have the big words that say like sweet or something like that. Those are all designed to make you buy. And then once you buy it and then and then you eat it and then you get that brain signal, you're going to want more. So they have you hooked and you just keep on giving them money. And what they give you in return is a dopamine hit and chronic diseases. Because like already discussed in this video, ultra-processed foods are linked to chronic diseases. Just to give you some examples on how profitable these food corporations are, according to Nestle's website, they made $12.7 billion, all right? And another example is Kraft Heinz Company. So their gross profit for 2025 was $8.309 billion, right? So there are many other companies that are putting in this amount of money, right? So when you see just how profitable these food corporations are, it makes sense why they would be incentivized to make you keep on buying them. So with all this being said, some people still argue that individuals are solely responsible for their dietary choices rather than the food itself. So people that argue this, they think that it's your choice whether or not you eat unhealthy foods or not. And if you don't want to get sick, just eat healthy foods. And now, I understand technically they are not wrong, but the thing is, like discussed earlier in this video, ultra-processed foods are designed to be addictive and hyper-palatable. And a lot of the times, they actually grow up on only ultra-processed foods. Most lunch cakes, actually most kids' food, even baby formula, it's all ultra-processed. That's all they've really ever known. So they were born through this, they've had it their whole life, they become addicted to it, and in reality, they don't really have a choice because they were given the cards of food addiction since a little kid. It takes a lot to actually break out of that. So although they are technically right that people are responsible for their own dietary decisions, corporations, they do design their food to be as addictive as possible. So if you grew up on it, it's way harder to stop eating it. You know what I'm saying? So with all this taken into account, I don't put sole responsibility on the individual who is consuming the food, but I blame the system that advertises and normalizes the consumption of ultra-processed foods. Another common argument is that ultra-processed foods are not inherently harmful, and they can be a part of a balanced diet when consumed in moderation. Supporters of this view point out that not all ultra-processed foods are equal. Some, such as fortified cereals, protein bars, or plant-based alternatives, can provide essential nutrients and convenience for people with busy lives, all right? While I do agree, if you have ultra-processed foods in moderation, you won't have any serious health effects, most likely. But this perspective overlooks the fact that moderation is often difficult to maintain due to the hyperpalatability and addictive nature of these foods. Additionally, the widespread presence of ultra-processed foods in the food supply makes overconsumption far more likely than occasional, controlled intake. So therefore, although ultra-processed foods can technically fit into a balanced diet, their design and their accessibility make them far more likely to contribute to poor health outcomes when consumed in moderation as opposed to whole foods. In conclusion, ultra-processed foods are unhealthy and addictive. They are linked to many chronic health conditions, and food corporations prioritize company profit over consumers' health. The majority of Americans suffer from chronic disease. Remember I said 3 in 4. And there is a clear correlation between chronic health conditions and the increase in consumption of ultra-processed foods. The growing impact of ultra-processed foods on public health demands immediate action from both individuals and society as a whole. Consumers must take responsibility and educate themselves on what they are eating and what they are feeding your kids. So that means you. And our government, I ask that policymakers put in rules and regulations that stop these corporations from prioritizing their profit over consumer well-being.